Mercury reportedly closed accounts for thousands of customers back in July, after they updated their policies and added around 17 new countries to the prohibited countries list. Now, most of the companies that had their accounts closed, they were given until August 22nd to move their money to a different account at a different financial institution. Some of those companies contacted GlobalBanks for help opening new accounts. So in this video, I thought I'd share an update on the process that these business owners went through and where we helped them successfully open. Now, in case this is your first time on the channel and you're wondering who I am and why I'm talking about any of this, my name is Chris and I'm the head of banking relationships at GlobalBanks. We help businesses, entrepreneurs, and individuals solve cross-border banking problems. And yes, sometimes that means helping them navigate account closures and opening bank accounts with banks that better understand their risk and operating profiles. And during this most recent round of account closures at Mercury, the focus was on finding banks that would be a better fit for the geographies involved. In particular, the country of residence of the shareholders, the country of operations of the company, the country where the bank accounts were frequently being accessed from, and the countries that transfers were being sent to and from on a regular basis. Now, you'll notice that I didn't mention the country of citizenship of the shareholder. And the reason for that is that Mercury, and basically most US banks, they're not usually concerned about your passport, within reason anyway. Instead, the most important country from a shareholder perspective is where you actually live, your residency. So if you're a citizen of Russia, Ukraine, Israel, China, Bosnia, the Philippines, or basically any other country that's been prohibited by Mercury or any other bank, but you live in the United States or any other non-prohibited country, you'll almost always still be able to open a US bank account, assuming the other geographic factors that I just mentioned don't involve any prohibited countries as well. Now, I should add a quick caveat here. We've had a number of other business owners contact us recently about closures since July, and a lot of these people think that their closures might be related to prohibited countries as well. But based on what we're seeing, it's highly unlikely. Instead, if you've had a Mercury account closed after July, it's likely due to transaction activity, meaning values, volumes, even transacting parties or countries, or an underlying issue with your client profile that may have come up during a compliance review. If that sounds like you, I want you to do something before you start applying for new accounts. Stop, take a closer look at your account activity, and try and determine what caused your account closure. Otherwise, if you just go ahead and start applying for new accounts, you'll likely end up with applications being denied, or if you are approved, a closure soon after your new account is open. So I'm going to share a video at the end of this one that will help you figure out why your account was closed. So if that's you, stay tuned until the end. Okay, Mercury prohibited country closures. Let's dig into a few examples, see what happened and where they opened. Now, we were contacted by a lot of people following this round of closures, including businesses with owners from the Philippines, Croatia, Albania, Ukraine, Bosnia, Nigeria, Palestine, even Myanmar. And in all of these cases, we had the business owners complete a free initial assessment to see if they qualified for our account opening services. This is the exact same free assessment that everyone now completes when they want to work with GlobalBanks to help them open accounts. You can check it out for yourself over at globalbanks.com/apply right now. Now, many of these companies that were impacted by the Mercury closures did qualify to use our services, but there were a few common traits that we noticed among the companies that qualified. First, they had real businesses, generating between $500,000 and $3 million per year in annual revenue. So these weren't random Shopify stores doing a few $1,000s in transactions per month. Now, second, they were in countries that Mercury deemed prohibited, but other banks did not. Meaning, even though they were operating from a country that Mercury didn't like, say the Philippines, we could still find other banks in the United States that would support them. Third, they could make a qualifying deposit for US banks, which usually means between $25,000 and $250,000 US. But most of the businesses that we helped after these Mercury closures opened with around $100,000 US, and that gave them access to some of the big box US banks 100% remotely. Fourth, none of these businesses had operations in the United States. They were all foreign-owned and operated US LLCs, but they did have ties to the United States, ranging from contractors to suppliers to customers, etc., etc., etc. Basically, they could prove their need for a US bank account. And the fifth and final common trait is that they all had straightforward structures, almost always with a single individual member or shareholder, so no holding company structures, multiple shareholders, or other layers of ownership that could complicate their profile and either classify their structure as complex, high risk, or undesirable from a compliance perspective. Now, these are just some of the common traits that we notice with companies following these recent Mercury closures. And we obviously still help companies with a wide range of ownership structures, involved jurisdictions, and at various deposit levels. But I'll be digging into those structures in a future video. For now, let's talk about what happened to all these companies impacted by Mercury. Well, the first big takeaway is that the majority of these companies opened accounts with big box US banks. Think Chase, Citi, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc., etc. And this includes companies owned and operated by shareholders from the Philippines, Nigeria, Lebanon, Ukraine, and other so-called prohibited countries. The specific bank and onboarding requirements, it obviously varied depending on the risk profile and depending on the bank. But like I said, these businesses were able to open accounts 100% remotely if they were able to make a qualifying deposit and had a qualifying business. Now, in terms of how long it took to open accounts, this varied, but in general, most of these companies had accounts opened within 5 to 7 business days after contacting us. And frankly, that's very fast. While our team obviously played an important part in this, that sort of turnaround time, it really speaks to the business owners themselves. Being prepared, having the necessary documents ready to go, and being able to clearly communicate their business activities to the bank after we introduce them. And in most cases, we suggest business owners should expect between 10 to 15 business days as a minimum when it comes to account opening for businesses, though it can obviously be a lot shorter, like I just shared, or longer if it's a higher risk situation. Okay, so what about the companies that we decided we couldn't help after they had their accounts closed by Mercury? And yes, there were a few that we decided we wouldn't be able to assist. Quick side note, our opening success rate is around 98% right now, meaning if 100 businesses contact us, there's only 2 that we usually can't help open accounts. And in our world, that's really great. So what keeps us from helping 2% of companies from opening bank accounts? Well, there's usually 2 main reasons that we can't help a company, and these are the exact same reasons that we couldn't help a few of the companies that contacted us following these Mercury closures. And the first reason, it's the countries involved, which includes all of the categories that I previously referenced: residency, operations, transactions, account access. But more specifically, it's the countries involved in combination with the chosen entity, in this case, a US LLC. If those business owners had decided to use a different structure, say a company registered in the UK, UAE, BVI, or one of the other tax-optimized jurisdictions, then they could have opened banks in other places. But US LLCs, while they are an excellent option, are often restricted to US banking. And unfortunately, certain combinations of shareholder residency, citizenship, transaction activity, etc., they're just not going to open accounts in the US. And the second reason that we couldn't help a few of these companies with opening accounts is due to the risk of their business activities. But again, this wasn't a standalone factor. Let's take crypto as an example. Now, crypto on its own is often categorized as high risk, but certain banks can still get there under the right circumstances. But if you then take a company involved in crypto, layer a higher risk or prohibited country on top for the shareholder's residency, then add transaction activity in higher risk countries, and a low deposit, you get to the point where it just doesn't make sense for banks to even look at your application anymore. And those are the sort of companies that we can't help, no matter how much we want to. Because if you have a number of different high-risk characteristics, and you're not going to be a profitable customer for the bank, there are not a lot of banks that are willing to take you on as a customer because it ends up being all risk and zero reward on their end. In certain instances, you can still find banking options available, but you are going to pay very high fees in order to access those options. So the real takeaway here is this: if you do have a real business, and you can make a qualifying deposit, and you have a reason to bank in the United States, you can open US bank accounts with some of the largest US banks 100% remotely. So if that's you, click the link in the description, take the free assessment to see if you qualify for our US account opening service. And if you want to find out the main triggers that result in bank account closures, you can get those in this video right here. I'll see you over there right now.